Welcome to another Building Bridges. Today we have an amazing topic on trauma-informed care. So we've got the lovely Mary and Moara, who are going to do a presentation shortly on this very topic. But before we get started, we'll do a couple of introductions and a bit of housekeeping and those sort of things. So I'll just hand over to Howard to start.
Okay. Hello. Thank you everyone for coming to Building Bridges. Now, usually, as our topic is rotating between NDI staff day, operational topic, and clinical topics. So this is our first clinical two topics for the year. So can I ask if there are allied health staff or allied health related business? Can you put a hands up? I just want to get some rough ideas about how many allied health staff is around here. Okay, cool. Thank you. So, okay, thank you. Now, I am usually doing all the housekeeping rules. So, yep. So, number one is the toilet is when you go out here, turn left and turn right. There's a toilet there. We got plenty of food at the back, the water and sushi and sandwich. You can please, help yourself a bit later. Also for the parking, so people always say that it's very hard to find parking. So just to have a note, so if you want to park, if you come next time, you park, go straight to this, go straight to Surface New South Wales parking lot straight away. There's plenty of parking there. Is you don't need to find anything. And the last bit is we will be recording the whole event. So if anyone that is not comfortable to be in front of cameras, come and speak to me a bit afterwards. So when we do the edits, then we will try to edit you out from the videos. So yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Earl. We started to recently ask how many people haven't been to this event. If you put your hand up, wow, look at that. That's amazing. That's probably 40%. That's pretty cool. So welcome. So maybe just to explain the format, obviously informational content. We have our vendors and thank you to our sponsors. So you'll see their signs around the room. And we have commercial vendors. We have a charity at every event, ACNC registered charity, and we have a participant vendor at each event as well. So I'm just going to introduce those people and we'll give them 30 seconds to a minute to talk about themselves. And then after the formalities of the event, after the formal stuff, there's more networking. And if you haven't spoken to them, you can see them afterwards. So let's start off with, Eamon, right next to me here. Space. Yep.
Hi everyone, my name is Amon, and thanks Building Bridges for having me as the participant vendor for this event. My background is that recently in a chair, which is how that came about. I had a car accident in 1993 in New Zealand, and I've obviously been involved in the industry from then, and I've worked in the industry since a young man in New Zealand, and then moved to Australia a few years ago and started up Nudge. And so I've been operating Nudge for a few years, where we supply assistive technology. So bathroom equipment, sports wheelchairs, lifters, and I just started it as a way of using my lived experience to sort of add to the community I'm passionate about.
So come and see us down the back. Yeah. Impactful. And Jenny from Removals for Hope. Jenny at the end? Oh, yes, there's a reason why. That's okay. But there is another Jenny, so I'll ask Jenny.
Now that was a smooth segue, wasn't it? Hi everyone, my name's Jenny from Concept Designs and Marketing, and I was first introduced to Building Bridges Network back in November, and had an opportunity to come and be part of the panel back then, and I really love what the crew, the team are building here, and wanted to be part of that. So I've just recently come on as a sponsor. Thank you. And one of the things I do, had 24 years of experience in digital marketing. And things are changing when you bring into that AI search. And that's one of the areas that I help. This is a behavioral change. It's a massive change that a lot of providers are finding that their participants are finding it harder to find them. It's a very busy marketplace. And so one of the things that I love to do is help NDIS providers get found, build that trust, and for their participants to actually be able to find them online. So I will be up the back for the rest of the afternoon. Come and have a chat if you've got any questions around marketing, around the Google space, around your website. I'd happily answer those questions for you. So yeah, I'm here to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. And Tommy from CareLogix, another sponsor. And thanks, Jenny. Just came on as a sponsor. I was going to give you the plug after, but you've done it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tommy Dam. I am the CEO and founder of CareLogix. I have always been in compliance industry in healthcare and then in clinical trials and then moving into NDIs and aged care. And I have developed a documentation system to help the frontline worker to easy document their work, anything to reduce the cognitive overload for them so they can focus on that human interaction. And then obviously the artificial intelligence behind it will collect the data and then summarize a report for them. And that's the one product that we have. And the other product we have is a chatbot that the office members have access to so they can query insight into that point of care, what's going on over there. So I want to bring leadership visibility at the point of care. That's what we're doing. So if you are interested, please come and see me over there, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it. Thank you so much.
One of the fewer local AI developers and
That is correct. Yes, we are sponsored by Microsoft. So actually, if you sign up today, we'll give you free unlimited credits so you can try it out and see how it works and all that. We don't train your data. Data belongs to you. We don't do any training on it. And if you compromise your account by giving to someone else, then it's on you, not on us. Disclaimer. All the data stays in Australia. It doesn't go overseas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Jenny, you get Jenny to speak first? Yeah. Okay, Jenny from Removals for Hope. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you, guys. So here at Removals for Hope, I run a person-centered furniture removals and in-home support service. It's slowly grown over the last 10 years or so, and I really started it from my own lived experience. I was at risk of homelessness and low income and new in Sydney, really. Moved up here from Perth, and I just started advertising in the PIF community, Pay It Forward pages, community pages, and so I appealed to the lower income demographic, just the word got out, and to the housing and homelessness sector, they really encouraged me to keep running with my business idea. They put the word out, it's just slowly grown over the years, and to the point now where I've expanded the services to include like packing and sorting and rubbish removal, cleaning, everything. It's just really about leaning into what the needs are of the I guess support staff and the clients, and just working together to move the client forward in life. So we also have the social traders, social enterprise registration. So we're and also the charity registration. So we're more for purpose rather than profit, and I really try to champion that as much as I can. We still are a business at the end of the day, so we do charge, but a lot of our money comes from brokerage. But in instances where the clients cannot access brokerage, I offer a pay it forward sort of pricing thing, and we'll subsidize their move as much as I can. That's the beauty of being having the charity status, because I'm not for profit and don't have set sort of KPIs and stuff that I have to meet. So and it just makes running a business just so much more enjoyable, really, to be honest. And just helping people, exactly, and the money just comes, and I'm very grateful. That's thank you for having me. Yep.
Thank you. The reason why that we put Jenny at the end is because last month our sponsors, United Engineering, the main sponsors, they are promoting their rehab bus. So the theme at that time is people go and take some really creative pictures in front of the bus, and the winner will get a prize. Now, so if people would like to check out what the photo is, please go on our linking page so you can check out the photos, how creative it was. Now, the prize for that time is Gina and June donate a $250 prize to donate to the charity. So we got our winner from last time, Susan, the winner from last time. Thank you. Okay, do you want to come? So.
Are you going to show the plate?
Oh no! They I should have. We should have.
Don't make me. You don't like them. I couldn't buy one. No.
No, so we got this 250 cash voucher. So we Jenny said Susan said would like to donate to the next charity organization. So yeah, so this is why we're featuring Jenny. So here you go.
It wasn't actually for charity. Susan said she worked for G.
Oh, sorry. Yep. So
Thank you.
We've had a lovely chat as back. So my pleasure. Thank you very much.
you're gonna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got two more. All right. Well, let's get started. So just before we get started, we like to make it as interactive as possible. I understand this is a presentation, so I'm sure you guys are welcoming questions, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, amazing. We did check that before, so that was a. But I might pass over to Mary and Moara. They will introduce themselves and go through what they're presenting today.
Hello. Okay. Hi, I'm Mary. I'm a psychologist and behavior support practitioner with Intertwined Health. Oh no, can you hear me now? I'm a psychologist and behavior support practitioner with Intertwined Health. And an offering today that we have is that we're doing a free restrictive practice training for anyone who's interested for their teams to help them identify RPs and how to fade them out. So please let me know if that's something your team would be interested in. Maybe I'm just not speaking loud enough. Hi everyone, my name is Moara. I work for Golden Heart Services. I'm the general manager. My background is in forensic mental health. That's my passion. And yeah, we help people rehabilitate out of correctional facilities back into the community and long-term psychiatric stays. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here today. And I guess what my offering is my knowledge. Any questions you guys have, and I used to be an NDIS and NDIA planner, so don't hold that against me, but maybe if you do have any system questions that maybe I can shine a light on. Yeah, happy to help. I can move through. Okay. So we have a couple of objectives today, so we kind of know what's going on. So we are going to obviously be looking at how trauma can influence behavior, how to recognize common trauma responses, how to apply some trauma-informed principles to real scenarios. So we're going through a case study today. And then we're going to be identifying practical strategies that promote safety. Yeah, I guess the reason why this came up is because there's a lot of providers out there who claim to be delivering trauma-informed practice. And I think that can actually be quite damaging when you don't actually understand what trauma-informed is. And I think that a lot of people might think that trauma-informed means just avoiding all triggers. And that's not really realistic, especially working within NDIS and the real world. We can't really safe-proof the world. We can't remove noises and remove neighbors and remove family, or in some cases maybe, but the point of today is understanding what true trauma-informed is and how we can actually provide that care. All right, so I love definitions. So I thought we'd set this in with the definition today. So what exactly is trauma? And so we always hear the word trauma, but sometimes there's a little bit of confusion about what that actually is. So it's an emotional or a physical response to one or more harmful or life-threatening events or circumstances with lasting adverse effects on your mental and physical well-being. So when you think about trauma and how that kind of eventuates, what kind of things do you think kind of pop up for you guys? Yeah? So there are levels. So there's mild, moderate, severe. Like when we're looking at like the diagnostic criteria for like say PTSD, for example. And then we've got like different trauma types. So you could have like the most common that everyone knows is PTSD, which is usually that there's a life-threatening event. But then there's also sort of coming into the scene now something called complex trauma, which is the idea that you can have not massive life-changing sort of traumatic events necessarily, but smaller ones that accumulate over time. And we'll be going through that in a little bit. But when we think about symptoms, so common symptoms are intrusive memories. So sometimes you could be just minding your own business and you'll have like a flashback, or just be ruminating about like the past incident and what's happened. Nightmares are really common as well. And that's because usually what you think about in the day is reflected in your dreams, right? So if you're thinking about washing machines all day, you're going to be dreaming about washing machines, right? It's the same thing with trauma.
So we're all dreaming about the NDOs?
And then dissociation as well. So that's kind of a more intense version of intrusive thought. So that's kind of when you're not aware of your surroundings. You feel like you're back in that trauma. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between like, am I here right now versus am I in that event? That's obviously going to cause distress. And then there's the physical reactions. So, the usual heart increases, sweating, blushing, that sort of thing. Avoidance and hypervigilance are also really common. So we tend to have a natural response to avoid the things that distress us. And unfortunately, what that does is it creates a bit of a feedback loop, because the more you avoid something, the worse you feel about it. And then the hypervigilance is that you're constantly, your baseline is really high and you're constantly sort of surveying your environment to see what possibly is out there that could hurt me, which is quite a natural response if you've been significantly hurt in the past.
I think that 100%. There's lots of different traumas. So, Gaber Mate, he's the father of trauma for me. And one of his presentations, he said, "Is anyone happy to share a traumatic event that they had?" And this woman put her hand up and she said, "When I was 12 years old, I went to a school camp, and during the night, a older boy came into my room and he sexually assaulted me." And then Gaber Mate said, "I'm really sorry that happened to you. When you got home, did you tell your mum?" And then she said, "No, I didn't feel like I could." And he said, "That's the real trauma." So trauma can also be not being supported. So sometimes the event or the impact isn't actually the trauma, but what happens afterwards, and feeling alone and unsupported in that space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because do you cover or consider the trauma mum's gone through because the daughter didn't tell her?
So there is something called vicarious trauma, which is essentially if you're exposed to other people's trauma, that can be traumatizing for you. And we see that most commonly, if you have a parent, for example, and their child has been traumatized multiple times, or service providers, allied health, hearing those stories all the time is also quite traumatic. So yes, that is a consideration.
Of course, I think that can be traumatic for everyone, and like listening to that, and I guess feeling like you, as a mum, you couldn't support your daughter in that case. But it's about also mum hadn't been supported in that situation to be able to respond. She did the best that she could in that situation. And I think something that I hold really close to my heart is you don't rise to your support, you fall to your level of training. So if you didn't have the knowledge, if you didn't have support, everybody does the best that they can with what they have. So it's not a blame thing. It's not. It's we did the best that we could.
So we kind of jumped the gun there a little bit, but like we were saying, one of the most common perceptions of trauma that we're aware of as a society is PTSD. And then there's the complex trauma, which is more smaller events over time that can cause sort of traumatic responses. And one of the things to kind of be aware of as well is what can be really traumatic, just like Mo was saying about like it's that lack of support, but it's also that feeling of being trapped and not being able to escape. It's feeling like that really that it's inescapable in that moment, and that can be also very traumatic. Now, complex trauma isn't a recognized diagnosis in Australia. In the DSM, we use the DSM manual, which is basically the psychiatric Bible here. The rest of the world, excluding the US, uses the ICD, where it is considered an official diagnosis. So hopefully we'll move in that direction. And then there's intergenerational trauma. So if you come from a background where your people have been traumatized, that trauma will carry through to the subsequent generations. Because if you're traumatized, you're teaching trauma responses to your offspring, and then they're teaching it to their offspring. And so there isn't an opportunity there to not be traumatized, essentially.
Yeah, so I went to the International Childhood Trauma Conference last year. It's something that I'm really passionate about because I think that behavior generates behavior. So when you we're all traumatized, I think, in this world, working in DIS, 100%. I can see everybody nodding, yeah. If you're not, it means you're new to the system. Welcome. So, so I think, so I did a talk about intergenerational trauma and the displacement of self and how it's so traumatic, not just to move countries, but you're actually leaving the people that gave you purpose, the people that gave you meaning. And as a child, you're relying on your parents to give you a sense of self, to give you a sense of security. And when they are relocating, and I'm not just talking about countries obviously adds a whole different layer of culture and language and socioeconomic status, and we won't even get into that because it's a whole different talk. But if you're moving places, suburbs, states, it's for a reason. People don't just get up and say let's try something different. It's usually there's a reason behind it, and I think that we just need to really acknowledge that in this sector that a lot of our participants are moved away from the things that they know, people that gave them their sense of self. Sometimes they haven't had the opportunity to even get to know who they are because they've never had a safe person around. So we need to be really aware when working within this system that we have a support system and they don't, and that creates a lot of trauma as well. We need to be aware of that when working with them.
Yeah, and with that in mind, like holiday periods are usually quite re-traumatizing for people because it's a reminder that other people have sort of their bases, their support systems, and they don't. So part of that trauma-informed care is to always put additional supports around those big holidays, and that could be anything from like Easter and Christmas to I don't know, sometimes like Australia Day. Like it doesn't have to be like big holidays. It's really dependent on the person.
Got a question here. So there's like 3 different types of trauma. Is there any studies to show that one type of trauma is harder to reverse, or they're all equally the same sort of thing? You know?
Do you mean like the incident that causes the trauma?
Like between like complex trauma, intergenerational, like PTSD, whichever, like is there one that's like harder to break free from?
Well, in terms of like treatment, the longer a trauma goes untreated, the harder it is to resolve. Also, I mean, look, it's kind of like when you think about the research about pain and comparing pain, right? Like some things are more traumatizing to other people than to someone else. So I'm not off the top of my head aware of like this trauma versus this trauma versus this trauma. But in terms of like factors that cause additional issues later on, I would say how long did it go untreated? How young was the person when it first happened? Because that forms their sense of identity. What was the support network like? And like Mo was saying, it is a big part of it is the response that we have to the trauma that can be an additional trauma to that person. So I think we have to think about it more, not so much from what's worse, but what kind of levels of support can we offer.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's like what Mary just touched on. You can't really compare suffering. Like suffering. If somebody's suffering, they're suffering. And I think what defines resilience for one, and that can be in your DNA, but also 100% your support system. So if you have a physical trauma and you're in a third world country where the roads are inaccessible, where people don't understand, where you don't have disability parking, that's going to be a lot harder for you to overcome than if you're in a first world country where people understand. And this is where I go back to support workers. They might be working alone, but every single thing that you do on your shift impacts the person before you and after you. So if everybody's giving the right support, everyone's putting in the right boundaries, then that person has a village, because it takes a village. It takes everybody doing the right thing. And sometimes when the trauma it's so deep, it's so painful, it takes every single person showing love, kindness, support. And then as soon as that falls down, it has a ripple effect, because it's so quick for you to just revert back to what feels familiar, which is that pain and suffering.
With regards to trauma, when we're discussing it, obviously you use the word traumatizing on point, which people just use in natural language without it necessarily being severe trauma digest definition. Is there a certain time period? So like I can obviously have a traumatic experience, but maybe the kind of like racing bullets or whatever it is goes on for a week, but after that week, it's done. Are we calling that trauma, or are we saying it has to have some level of longevity for it to be?
So from a diagnostic perspective, it's a month. So the initial, if you say there's an event that's happened, that first month we would go under sort of an adjustment disorder, where you're just adjusting to the new reality of life. And then if there are any symptoms after that month, then we're considering more of a PTSD diagnosis. But I'm trained on the DC, DSM, not the ICD, so I'm not too across the actual criteria for complex trauma. Yeah.
From an emotional point of view, Mary is the brains and I'm the heart, so she's going to talk very much into data, and I talk a lot about lived experience, I guess, and the emotional side. And I think that there's definitely no time frame, and I think that in this world, a lot of us have been taught to just bottle it down and just get up and get on with it, and we don't have time to feel, because if we do, then we don't go to work, or things happen and then we can't eat, and then life doesn't go on. And this topic has come up a lot this week, so maybe I'll bring it up, because I'm very intuitive, as you guys can tell. And somebody said to me, why would I go to therapy? Because none of this bothers me, and I did one therapy session, and now I've become quite emotional and sensitive, and I'm not okay with being like that. But the truth is, normally when we don't feel anything is because we've numbed it all out, and we actually are not stepping into the present and feeling into our body. And when we become in touch with ourselves, then it is like a wave of emotion. We feel everything so deeply because we're not used to it. And then people think, oh, I'm so sensitive and I cry. And it's like, yes, but I also feel joy. And a lot of people actually don't feel joy. So don't be ashamed to feel your body and feel the sensations and feel those emotions, because yes, we feel pain and we feel anger, but we also feel happiness and joy. And that's what we're hoping to bring to our participants too.
Just to answer your question, I just looked it up. ICD is also 4 weeks.
So I've got a question around trauma-informed best practice. So for a lot of providers in the room, or small providers who are maybe looking at policies or procedures or even processes around how they can best train their staff in trauma-informed practices, have you got a couple of sort of key pointers that we need to be part of those processes and training, so organizations, businesses, workers are not just talking the talk, they're actually implementing that into practice? Because it's tricky, right? What does trauma-informed best practice actually look like on the ground?
Yes, and we'll be covering that in a little bit.
Oh, sorry, you have a question?
So for complex trauma, you mentioned it's like a series of small events, right?
Well, it's a series of, sorry, if I can clarify. So with PTSD, it's life-threatening events, right? So for complex trauma, it doesn't have to be life-threatening necessarily. So they're not small events. They're just not necessarily going to kill you, but they could still be pretty significant events.
So that was my question. So do you think there is a possibility that somebody might actually be going through the complex trauma and be unaware, but it's not significant enough to kind of have it?
People talk themselves out of their emotions all the time, and they like minimize what they're feeling all the time. So super common. Yeah.
When we talk about, you mentioned that this is a limb, you can expose to. How does that have a role to play? So let's say somebody is going through like a complex trauma over years, but they wake up 3 years later that, oh my God, this is what my situation is. So when does the trauma really stop?
Well, it's not so much about the starting point. It's just more about sometimes things resolve themselves. And so from an allied health perspective, we need to know when do we give them space versus when do we need to come in. And that time period is 4 weeks. So if you've had an incident, we're usually kind of giving you general strategies to help manage your emotions, but we're not necessarily treating trauma right then and there, because that can actually be re-traumatizing for the person. Because one of the things that you want to do is create a little bit of emotional distance between the event and you, and that is time. So you need time basically where you're not thinking about it. If you're speaking to, going to therapy in that first 4 weeks, then you're definitely thinking about sort of what's going on, right? So then once the 4 weeks has passed, then we're like, okay, it hasn't resolved itself on its own, and I made sure that I haven't traumatized you in that process of trying to treat this. Now we're going to start dealing with that trauma. So that's just more of a criteria on what allied health need to do, not necessarily how the trauma is presenting.
In a situation like this, like the 4 weeks was where the person starts realizing that,
No, from the event. So if you have an event today and then in 4 weeks, it hasn't resolved, then from a technical perspective, that's when we would be offering trauma-based therapies, right? It doesn't mean that you're not actively experiencing trauma, though. You could be experiencing it from the moment it happened.
I just want to ask for clarification. So I took a while back, I work traumatized kids, and most of them have been diagnosed with PTSD. And a while back, I took a training that was called complex trauma training. And the description of complex trauma, it wasn't only cumulative events of trauma that were not life-threatening, but also that they were given by the primary caregivers.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's also it's not limited to that, right? It's also kind of like if you felt like you couldn't escape in that moment, if it's a primary caregiver, like it's not so strict that, if this person traumatizes me, it's not real trauma, but if this person does, then it is trauma. So it's not that kind of black and white.
You can't really define trauma because we yes, we've got all the scales and everything, but our Mary's like, yes, you can
define trauma.
What I meant to say is a life-threatening moment. Our brains, we've got animalistic brains, right? So we're still in that survival mode. So anything. So right now, if I'm talking and I'm very locked in, and when Mary goes to scare me, it might be that I'm going to, oh my God, that was life-threatening to me because something in my brain, something's triggered in me. Maybe something happened in my DNA that's got triggered down to me, that you know what I mean? Like it's very hard to define for a single one of us what that can look like, because with intergenerational trauma, it triggers down as well. It comes from your DNA. Something happened to my mum at that age, it trigger something in me that I'm not even aware of.
Yeah, it's called epigenetics. So as trauma can actually change your genetics, and you can pass that along. Yeah. So just moving on to the yeah.
Very long movie.
Two people.
With the PTSD, these are life-threatening experiences which are classified under that diagnosis.
Yeah, so life-threatening.
And then because all that term tends to be thrown around quite a bit by a few people that I've been associated with. And it's like, well, it's not necessarily always life-threatening, but you've mentioned that it's only a life-threatening
for a clinical diagnosis.
Clinical diagnosis.
But it's kind of like who defines what's life-threatening for you, and that's where the line gets a little bit blurred. It's very personal.
Well, this is why the complex trauma movement is coming about to recognize that it doesn't have to be life-threatening. Just like vicarious trauma, like allied health haven't necessarily experienced, the earthquake, but just hearing about it is traumatizing. Yeah.
Sorry, everyone.
Jumping ahead, but I had a great question. As an independent support worker myself, I've been in multiple situations where either the family or the participant have a big trauma from me. Are there any strategies or things that you can say, because it kind of throws you in the deep end? You want to help, you want to validate their feelings. Like, is there something that you guys follow that keeps your sanity and your...
It's coming. It's coming.
Next slide. Jumping ahead. Sorry, guys.
Questions, and we're probably predicting topics because it's such a popular topic. If you can hold questions,
Interactive is good.
keep some towards the end.
Just to also with life-threatening as well, that also includes sexual violence as well. So that kind of gets wrapped up in there because it's the belief that you're going to die as well. Yeah.
I know we're about to move on, but a lot of what everyone's saying, and I think the key message that I'm hearing, and I want asked if this is correct, is the definition is also incredibly individual. So whether she's saying life-threatening to that individual in that moment, it could be. Whether it's a trauma, could be. Whether they're experiencing it, I guess, depends on that individual. Is it affecting their ability? And I'm not an expert, I'm going to seek clarification, but whether they're no longer doing something that they used to do, or whether they can't do something that they used to be able to do, or I guess timelines can be skewed depending on, and I think how much you know that person, or
Yeah, so there is a difference between
yeah.
experiencing a trauma versus being traumatized, right? So if you have a trauma, but then some people just brush it off really, and then they just carry on about their life like that. That wouldn't fall under that, even if it was life threatening, because it hasn't really impacted them. Because there's multiple steps to this criteria. The one that we've only been talking about is like that instigating event, but then there's also kind of like how long has it been going on for, the severity of it, how is it impacting their day-to-day life, like all of these sort of comes in when we're thinking like, is this person traumatized? I do want to clarify though, you don't need a diagnosis to use a trauma-informed approach either.
And I think definition, there is a very good definition that Gabriel Mate has said. He's a leader of trauma. So he says, and that kind of covers everything. He says trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you because of what happened to you. And that kind of covers all the trauma.
Yeah, and I think what's really important to note is that we're just touching the surface. People are just starting to learn about trauma, and I know that's something that gets thrown around, but for you to have an idea, so 2025, the year before that, at the International Childhood Conference, which all the fathers of trauma they come from all over the world, and they came, no one spoke about disability. And I was sitting there going, they're the most traumatized group. What do you mean? They have to do with all of this, and my NDIS hat on, and I'm just thinking, how can you guys be out there talking about all of these incredible knowledge and not even thinking to mention what everyone's going through? And then last year in 2025, we had 3 people that touched upon it. They touched upon it, and so I think there's still so much research and so much that we're learning every single day. It's kind of like the diets, right? Back in the day, eat full cream, don't eat full cream, and now macros and now protein, and it's every day is changing because we just learn more and more and more. So take everything knowing that every single person's experience is so different, that we have to come in with a trauma-informed approach, which is acknowledging that everyone has a different experience, and it doesn't make it less or more. Your suffering is your suffering, and I need to respect that.
So on that note, with disability, you'll see that people with disabilities, the research varies, but it ranges from about 2.5 to 10 times more likely to experience a trauma. So that equates to about 65 to 86% of people with a disability will have experienced a trauma or be traumatized. And the reason that that's the case is because there's an increased vulnerability. So I'm speaking specifically about intellectual disability here. There's more reliance on others, so you require people to be good, really, around you, to have a good team to support you. There's communication differences, so there might not be a synergy there between them. Also, considering the history of institutionalized settings, like we got to remember, like that was only faded out like 10 years ago. That's not a very long time. And then there's the historical segregation as well. And then a lack of accessible treatments. It's only in like because of the NDIS that there are now accessible treatments. Before this, you weren't really going to be getting a lot of help if you had an intellectual disability. Where are the funds going to come from? So that is part of the story that's happening here. Yeah, context. Okay, do you want to do case study? Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's use a case study. So we have Alex. They're 28 years old and they're getting some support at home. Staff have reported that Alex frequently refuses support, raises his voice when staff enter his room, becomes distressed if routine changes, and occasionally leaves the house abruptly. And staff have described Alex as being difficult to engage.
So sorry, I'm just going to stop you there.
Yeah.
What's the first thing that's wrong with this, with the scenario? As someone in the industry, if I read that, what's the first thing?
Objective.
Yeah, Alex is difficult to engage. Why?
Not trying to engage with the models, obviously.
And he's 28 and he needs a choice.
Perfect. Sorry.
Yep. So with that in mind, you've answered really the first question right there.
You Dan.
So when we think about these behaviors that Alex is showing, how can we interpret those behaviors through a trauma lens? How does behaviors make sense in that framework?
I think you touched upon a good one where you said that they don't understand what you're saying.
So I could be wrong here, but I noticed that in one of the case studies, he did get triggered by a change in routine. A lot of participants find safety with routine and it brings them a bit of stability. So having that broken from them, it can really affect them both mentally and physically, I find.
Yeah, can I? So if we take the trauma out, so if we let's just suppose that we agree with what I said and everyone has some sort of trauma. It's just informed care. Yeah. So the more information we have, the better support we can provide. Everybody, our behavior is driven by one or two things. We're either trying to acquire something or we're either trying to escape from something. It's very easy for me because I am vocal to say, hey, Emmanuel, can you please get me this bottle of water? Because I'm trying to acquire the water. But if I don't have the communication means to do that, if I'm nonverbal, if maybe I don't know how to do that, I've never been taught that, I could just grab Emmanuel or I could just point, and that's because my behavior is communicating something. And not all, I'm not minimizing what trauma informed is, but all there is providing a support with as much information as we can. Like this person doesn't like a change in routine. This person doesn't like cold water. This person prefers female to male. It's compiling all the information in our preventative measures, right? We don't want to be in our treacherous measures, which is actually escalating behavior and putting restrictive practices in place. We shouldn't be getting there because we really should be putting our preventative measures in place to understand the participant, gather all that information, and then make the changes. So if you and I, for example, if you know that your shoes are going to give you blisters, what are you going to do? You're going to put socks on. That's a preventative measures. You guys do that every single day. You wake up, you look outside, it's going to rain, I'm going to take an umbrella. That's a preventative measure. Why are we not doing that for our participants? Why are we not safeguarding everything before actually going and providing the support?
I was going to say something similar in that he's obviously having issues communicating what he needs and he's doing what he knows will get his needs met, even if it's the wrong way of going about it, but essentially what you just said. So thanks.
Gigi, you had a question?
Yeah, I just really feel so strongly about communication. And I think, often we presume what the client needs rather than exploring ways to actually find out what they want and giving them choice and control. Often choice and control is such a strong wording that's often used, but how do we actually apply that to the people that we're actually providing quality care to? So I think, a lot needs to be, go walk and talk the talk. It's all about their goals and how do we achieve it. They're the voice. How do we extract that voice within, regardless if they're verbal or non-verbal?
Yeah, 100%. And I think with the NDIS and even talking about goals, how many participants actually even know what the goals are in the NDIS plan?
They even have a choice or say in that. Often it's prescribed, it's dictated. Their goals are set, but, do they like the activities? Are these things that they even have a say in it? Often it's not.
When we take a client on, we always ask, what are your goals? And they're often not the same goals that are in the plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's coming from a family because that's what they want their son or daughter to do. Is it what they want to do?
Yeah. And
Also, goals change as well. 100%. Yeah.
and with like if you think about a newborn, right? And a baby who cries all the time and because that's all they know how to do. So then a new mom has to get up, move around. Maybe it's hungry, maybe it's tired, maybe it's the nappy, maybe it doesn't like this feeling of the clothes, maybe it's too dark, maybe it's too noisy. You don't stop until your baby stops. So why are we not doing that for our participants? And why are we just taking information? Or participant comes, this is how we've been doing it for the last 6 years. Well, I've changed in 6 years. How about we give them an opportunity to show us? Maybe they don't even know what they don't know. Well, we don't know what we don't know.
Sorry, I was just going to go back to what Gigi was saying earlier, and the word activities struck me. And one of the things I think that I've come to realize over time is, what are we trying to do? If we're trying to fill a person's day with activities, then yes, activities are fun, but they're not an actual role. I might get up in the morning, brush my teeth, because the role, the function of that is I'm going to work. But if I'm doing a sticking, pasting, cutting, crafting activity, there's no function to that unless I'm creating a mosaic for Mother's Day coming up. And I think that also makes a large difference, because I'm now being forced to do something, which if I was Alex and a staff member came and said, right, it's time to do sticking and pasting, I would do exactly that. Yeah.
The two things that human beings need are purpose and belonging. So you get up and you go to work because you have a purpose. You come home because you belong to your family, or you go to church because you belong to your community, or this is a beautiful community. I come here because I love this community. But your participants, if they have no job, if they've got very limited contact with their family, if they've got no friends, or if they struggle to have a social connection, or the only people that they see are their paid supports, what purpose and what meaning, what belonging do they have in their life? And then you wonder why their behaviors don't change. But what's driving the behavior?
Just because we are wary of time, we're going to move on to the next slide. So when we think about then the trauma context, so we know that Alex now, after getting some information from him, has a history of environments where he had little control, experienced unpredictable, unsafe interactions with caregivers. So when we now know that, it makes sense that if someone's kind of coming into their space and taking charge and their choice is being taken away, then it makes sense that they're going to be having this type of response. So when we think about trauma responses, trauma basically influences how we're going to be perceiving threats. So common responses include like fight, which is the anger, like the verbal aggression. It can be flight, so leaving situations quickly just to escape, really. Then there's freezing, which is the withdrawal or the shutdown. And then there's fawn, which is
the people pleasing. So that's also can be a trauma response where if you have a person that's like overly agreeable and they never say no to anything, that's a little bit of a red flag there. We need to make sure that we are giving them the space to be able to say no, to feel safe to be able to say no. So let's consider then which of these types of common like trauma responses was Alex exhibiting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe initially, yeah.
I think it's also important to know that if your initial response isn't available to you, you go to your second one. So, for example, if Alex was a fight and he couldn't fight someone because they were physically removing himself, he might then freeze, or he might just disassociate, or whatever it is. The second one, if the first one's not available to you.
Yeah, and when backed in a corner, he'll just agree with whatever you say. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a question at the back, and then your question.
No, mine was a bit bad to this scenario where the staff was saying Alex was difficult. Coming from the operations point of view, and I came from the support worker role, and I've lived the experience of using that word. This person is difficult to my team leaders and all. And to best summarize it is when we often say, for example, to lift this chair is difficult, is because I don't know how to do it. And when the staff is saying that, is because they don't know much about Alex and they don't know much on how to help him. So when you get frustrated and they are limited with the skills they've got and they're delivering it, and Alex is not responding to it, so that's what prompted. So I just wanted to make a reference in terms of information towards the carer and also the people going out there to care for the participant, to know holistically. And if we get that kind of word, it means that they don't really have enough information to support the participant.
Yeah, and we'll have some communication strategies later on so that we can see different words that we can use.
Did you have a question? Sorry.
Maybe Alex hasn't suffered trauma in the past, but he's 28, wants to ride trains every day, doesn't want staff in his room, and is pissed off with these staff arriving every day and not letting him ride trains all day. And that's the trauma. But if people think he's been traumatized when he's 28 and should be allowed to do these things, then that's a bit of a risk too, because staff aren't taking the responsibility, or the service have got NDIS funding and now they're going to put all this staff in there.
Well, I think it's also just about perspective, right? Like if you go into a situation assuming trauma and using trauma-informed principles, whether or not that person is or isn't traumatized, those principles are still good, because there's still, and we'll literally next slide go into those trauma-informed principles, which I think, let's just do that now, Howard. Go into the next slide. So if we're looking at kind of like those principles, we want to have a safe environment for Alex. We want that environment to be welcoming to them. We want to have trust. We want to have collaboration. We want to have choice. We want to empower them. We want to respect kind of their beliefs and their systems. And I think doing that for everyone is usually a pretty good idea, whether or not they've been traumatized or not.
I think, again, going back to the trauma-informed, it's just informed care. We should be doing that for every single person, regardless if they're traumatized or not. When I meet a participant, I don't think, oh, what trauma have you been through? I think you're a beautiful human being in front of me, and I'm going to respond to how you're presenting in front of me, because regardless of the diagnosis, everybody presents very different every day, and we need to be equipped to be able to handle that. So I think one mistake that I see this in support workers all the time. They say, I'm trained in trauma informed. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Oh, I know that my participant gets triggered by blue cars, so I go out in the street and I look for blue cars and I stop them. Like, okay, amazing, that's great. But what happens when you are crossing the road and the blue car comes, and what are you going to do then? Oh, that's not trauma informed. Trauma informed is making sure, one, that you have all the information that you possibly can. And I understand in the world of NDIS that sometimes can be none. And this is where then we go to the other ones, where is you're creating a safe space. And I don't mean like a safe space as in where there's no blue cars. I mean psychologically safe for the person to build trust with you, where they feel that they can actually communicate their needs and they don't have to escape. And going back to you, is it Jenny? So I can't read your name. Susan, sorry, I got confused with the two Jennys. This is Mabo trademark, so if you're going to use it, please reference Mabo. But what we do is called a SEAL test. So SEAL. Is it safe? Is it effective? Is it appropriate? And is it lawful? So this applies for absolutely everything. And as a support worker, before I say something or before I do something, is it safe? Is it safe for me to say this? Is it effective? Is it going to change something immediately? Is it going to make my participant feel good or bad? Is it appropriate? Is it appropriate for me to be bringing this up? And is it lawful? Because as a support worker, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an ambulance, I'm not a doctor. So is it lawful for me to be giving this advice? So if you implement that every time where you're doing something, you're taking a participant somewhere, is it safe? Is it effective? Is it appropriate? And is it lawful? You can't really go wrong, hopefully.
One of the other things to consider as well is checking in with your own emotions, because emotions are contagious. If you're coming into a situation stressed and fretting over something, then you're going to pass on that anxiety onto someone else. So just simple things like just taking a deep breath before you go into a difficult situation, or just mentally preparing yourself before you go into that situation. Because if you are the calm in the storm, then that emotion will follow that as well. Yep.
Behavior breeds behavior.
Just going so back to the previous slide when you had the 4 things, with the last one, fawning, is included in that the kind of, which is obviously a kind of critical issue, but we don't talk about it as being a challenging behavior because it doesn't appear that way, the level of compliance that people with intellectual disability show while receiving support. Because it feels to me like one of the reasons it's almost more problematic is because we don't interpret it as being a challenging behavior, right? Like support workers will be like, I'm taking the lead and they really want to follow me and they really want to do these things. But what's actually occurring is just a level of compliance. But it's hard. But in that case, it's not, no one's being aggressive, no one's at risk or unsafe, but it's a problematic behavior. Is that what when you talk about fawning, is that compliant nature of sometimes people with intellectual disability what we're talking about when there is that or not?
It's a red flag, right? So it's not either or. It's more about context and how often are they being compliant, and have they ever said no to anything ever, right? And so usually the way that we want to manage that is by giving choices, right? So okay, do you want to do A or do you want to do B? And then they can pick that way instead of just saying, hey, do you want to do this? And then the usual default is yes. So that's how you can kind of support them to make choices.
I think it also comes from wanting to please the support worker. So even if there's what I see often with my participants is, Mo's coming. I know she likes to go to the park. So I'm going to say, let's go to the park because that's what she likes to do. So sometimes working with a participant who has an intellectual disability, it's so agreeable, is often the hardest because you have to think about every little thing that you say and how you say it. And, we want to give them choice and control. And sometimes that's all they know, again, because they're trying to please the only form of safety they have in their life. And it's quite sad because they're just masking, and then they get home and they're exhausted, and my participants with intellectual disability, that all they want to do is please. They just want to please the support worker, and they don't even know what they like because they haven't had a chance to explore that. They haven't had the right supports to sit down and feel safe, where they can actually relax and be like, I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm not going to feel guilty. It's not that they're going to get in trouble. I'm going to feel guilty if my support worker is having a bad time. And I know my support worker is having a bad time because she's on her phone or because she doesn't going to go for a walk. And this is where having really good support workers that understand and are actually doing the job properly come in to help with that.
What you call that honeymoon period, isn't it? Where when you develop a new relationship, so they're not big disabilities or children, you know, there's that sort of wanting and wanting to please because of where they come from and their experiences. And it's a honeymoon period. And then, you know, that could be 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And then true behaviors or true components of their personality start to come out once they feel safe. And then a lot of people experiences then happen from that point.
Yeah. So with those trauma-informed principles in mind then, so what happens when we're not using those principles? And this is when we can re-traumatize the individual because the way that we're behaving is taking that choice of control away from them. We're misinterpreting trauma responses as behaviors of concern rather than realizing that they're the problem. Perhaps our responses are the problem. Then there's tends to be an over-reliance on control, which then a consequence of then diminishing their skill building ability because they're not given the opportunity to try and do things and to be allowed to fail. Failure is essential to learning. You have to fail to learn. And so by constantly, stepping in too early, that's also an issue. And then it also leads to a loss of trust in services and a lack of autonomy. And, maybe they're moving from service to service because this keeps happening to them. And then just the practical staff and family burnout as well because they're not receiving consistent and adequate care.
Yeah, I think it's important also to remember that the trigger is the roadmap to what the pain is, the unmet need. So if we're stopping to really sit down and analyze and take all the information and be like, okay, what actually happened here? What's the need that wasn't met? And how can we safely meet that need within our scope? So what the behaviors caused by trying to escape for something or acquire something, what happened here where's the gap and how can we then fill that in a safe and appropriate manner?
Okay. So why don't we try a little exercise where imagine you're supporting Alex when he raises his voice or refuses help. How could a trauma-informed response improve his experience in safety? Yep. Anything else?
Any questions? What would you like to do?
Yeah.
Space.
Possibilities.
Space? Yeah.
Got door before you go into the actual accommodation. So you guys see says all.
Yes.
So if you are entering the room, you gotta ask for consent before you do.
Yes.
So you know that you're allowed to go in there. It's doing the meeting, and for example, you don't like meeting that. You're asking that before you do that.
Sounds like you're delivering an informed approach.
Yeah. Something I've already mentioned with other headache is that when you have the trauma response created.
Sorry. When you observe a trauma response behavior, validating that feeling always opens the door to knowing more about the participant, that young person or that young person.
Yeah, name it to tame it. That's right. That's a good one to remember. Name it to tame it. So that's very frustrating. That's hard. That's really hard. They want to feel heard and supported.
I think a distinction here as well is that we're validating the emotion, not necessarily the behavior. So we're not saying it's okay for you to be yelling or throwing things at me, but we're saying, I get that you're upset. Yeah. Yes. How can we work together? What do you need? Yeah. And I think also in these time periods, your brain is already taken up doing all of this sort of like panic really in the background, and so sometimes making choices in that moment of panic is really difficult. So instead of having an open-ended question about what would you like to do, offering options instead, like would a glass of water be helpful right now? Should we go for a walk? Do you want me to leave you alone? And just offer like one option at a time and get a yes and no response and work your way down the chain, because sometimes, especially with intellectual disability, giving 10 options, that's just way too overwhelming on a normal day.
And with a lot of our participants, sometimes they don't even know what they're feeling and they don't know how to vocalize their emotions. So one thing that I've learned, which is really difficult and it takes a lot of practice, is having a two-way conversation with one person. So sometimes when the participant is frustrated, you can help by vocalizing for them. And what I mean by that is, hey, I can see that you're pacing, and when I pace, that means I'm frustrated. Do you think that you could be frustrated, and helping them to vocalize, not saying, oh, I can see that you're angry, because we don't know what they're feeling. All I know is what I do when I'm feeling that way. So, oh, I can see that you're standing up. That usually means that I'm agitated when I'm standing up. Is that how you feel? And helping them to connect their emotions to their brain. And then they might be like, oh, yeah, I actually do feel frustrated. Oh, okay, cool. You feel frustrated. Oh, sorry to hear that. Is it because I feel frustrated when I don't have a drink? Is it because you don't have a drink? And then you're having a conversation where you are helping them to think, is it because I don't have a drink? You're actually helping them to have that conversation. Gigi, sorry.
That's okay. Totally agree with everything that's been said. And I think one of the important things to remember is just making sure that we don't say, I understand, because a big trigger for people with trauma is when somebody says, I understand how you feel, because you actually don't. No one's walked their shoes. So obviously, having worked in a child protection space, biggest triggers for young children that are constantly traumatized or going through this is where somebody is saying to them, it's okay, I understand. So allowing them to actually express themselves, allowing that, just they have that time out. This is your time. I'm here. And just allowing them to actually feel safe. Yeah, because sometimes they actually want their space. They don't want you to sort of be around. Just validating that they have their own space around them.
I think it's also important to not work in absolutes. So for some people, saying I understand might be really triggering, but then for other people, they will ask you, do you understand how I'm feeling? And they want you to say that. So I think each person is different. And I think what will be really helpful here is if we move over to some communication strategies. So we have some do's and don'ts over here. And you'll see at the very bottom, the link, if you ever want to have a look at it yourself, there's some resources. And it's just about, it's a little bit obvious, but it's kind of, use language that's respectful. Don't be negative or judgmental, right? Use statements like, thank you for sharing with me, because I didn't have to share. And rather than saying, why didn't you tell me sooner? Versus, validate that person's experience. Don't minimize their trauma. Allow people the time that they need to find their words. Don't rush them. Ask whether the person feels like they've been listened to. So getting that feedback, you're never going to get it right on the first go. Someone might say I understand, someone might say they don't, but you get that feedback after, maybe when they're a little bit calmer. Like, does that work for you? Would you like me to say something different? Because ruptures in rapport are normal, and fixing them actually makes that relationship stronger. As long as you can resolve the issue that's happened, like, that relationship will end up better than it started. And if we go to the next slide. Let's have a think about how we can incorporate some of that language. So let's say Alex responds positively when staff give him choice and predictability. Use calm communication and allow time for him to process changes. What can we say instead of stop shouting, you need to follow instructions, you're refusing help again?
I always say, I'm here for you and I want to help you. What I need you to take a breath and hear me calmly. Using the words.
Anything else?
Can we try that again? Can we just, what it just said, can we just try that again in a different way?
Anyone else got any ideas?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Shin? Yep. Wouldn't it be very, very important to first understand the relationship you have with St. Alex? Because I know, I've worked in child protection for quite a bit of time before jumping into NDIs and dealing with kids specifically, or even like 28-year-olds. If you go in and are too truthful with the way you communicate, that could be a trigger. So, depending on how Alex is, maybe chill out, bro, could be a good way of me, maybe. Well, depending on the circumstance.
Context is so important, right? Everyone's going to have a different relationship with that person. I will remind you, though, we are professionals, right? There are some things we don't say, regardless.
I think and I talk a lot about information, but especially working with the correctional facility, I can tell you that we get participants at 11 p.m. on a Friday night with absolutely no information, and then I think it comes back to the principles of his shouting, which means there's an unmet need there, and I could easily say, oh, I can hear that I'm getting something wrong within the first time, obviously, because if the behavior continues, that's different. But if he's shouting at me, I can like, oh, I can hear that. I'm perhaps not understanding you properly. What is it that I'm doing wrong? Can you walk me through it? Because he's either trying to acquire something or he's trying to escape from something. If he's yelling at me, he's probably trying to acquire something, and I'm probably not getting it. And I think when support workers escalate, like, pull your voice down, you don't have to talk to me, like, even if they say it kind of like, don't speak to me like this, it's like we're there because there's an unmet need. So how can I find that so then the behavior doesn't escalate so we can have a good outcome?
Can
So
can
I
I
want
ask
to show some examples of some statements, and there's a mistake in one of them, and I want you to see if you can find it. So,
sorry, Ali, I know do you want to answer a question?
Also gives them a sense of control. And I think that could also be an unmet need. That once they have a sense of control of the environment around them, you can actually regulate them back into a calm.
control is the baseline. Everyone wants control in their life. We can assume that that person needs control, and we need to kind of think about like how can we facilitate that.
But just with those three responses, the one thing I noticed was they're all statements. You're telling them instead of, I guess, let's just assume, like in situations where you know someone, I've experienced where if I've known someone to a certain point where we've had these conversations before, we've been through the tried and tested method, and I know, from that moment, because of years, I know what to say to that person, and it could be very different depending on different people. But I would assume they're asking a question if you don't know the person's the first time. Questions would be a lot more helpful than statements, like, how can I actually help you here? Or depending on the person and the scenario.
Yeah.
Would that be?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But as a support worker or as a practitioner, I think the response is always, my job is to keep you safe. So let's work together. What can I do? I always go back to that no matter how bad the escalation is. I'm always like, my job is to keep you safe. I want to be here. I want to work with you. My job is to keep you safe. Because I think that a lot of the control is feeling like they need to feel they're not feeling safe. They're not put forward. They're not helping with the chore or whatever because they don't have rapport with the support worker. Probably because they're not feeling safe.
Any other mistakes in those statements? Yeah.
So I think with the second one says, would you like me to choose when we do this? You're not giving them a choice.
Mm.
Let him choose or her.
Yeah.
That then guides you. Okay, I can see you tomorrow. Let them speak. What would they need? What do they want?
Yep. Any other mistakes?
Okay, in my many years of working with people with trauma or clients with trauma, I've come to realize that most of the causes of this trauma are maybe they're being bullied or things like that. They lose control of themselves, or they're being controlled, baiting, or whatever type of forceful acts was that. So that creates fear, and you're trying to resist whatever information, even before you present it, you're trying to resist. They're creating a boundary. So what I usually do is I come with no resist. I'm not pushing anything.
No agenda, yeah.
No, I'm not pushing anything. I ask you, what do you want? Whatever thing you want, I'm happy to do it for you. You understand? Even when you're still resisting, I say, okay, I'm available whenever you want me to help you. Feel free. I'm available to help you.
Yep.
Yes, I've worked with a client. I was told before the start of shit that she hasn't taken her medication for a couple of months. So when I came there, and I saw her I remember what I asked her was, okay, does this belong to you? She said, yes. Okay, do you mind if I put it here? She said, okay, no problem. And then I asked her again before I left. I said, okay, I noticed that she was in a good mood. And I asked her, can you do me a favor? She said, what? And I asked her, would you take your medication? She paused. And she said, yes. So before the end of the shift, she asked me, okay, do you want to take me out so we'll go buy something? She tested me again. I want to say you're a terrible driver. I said, okay. I haven't. I have not driven. She said I was a terrible driver. I say, okay, no problem. When I drive, you tell me if I'm a good driver or not. And then we went after everything, and she came back. She said, well, you're a good driver. She took her medication. The following day, the manager came and asked, what did you do to get her to take medication? I said, yeah, I just laid
Treated
up,
like a human being.
gave her power back. Yeah, I gave her a part. I'm not, if you say no, it's no. I'm not forcing anything on you. Anything you say, I do. That's what I'm here for. That's it.
Yeah, and participants are constantly um no, I want to say testing, probably not the right word, but they have been through so many support workers. They have been through so many providers. Even if you're an outstanding provider, you're going to move. If you're an outstanding provider, the reality is you're probably going to move jobs and you're going to get poached. And so your relationship with the participant is not long lasting. So think about how many new relationships they've had to build, and then the support workers, they work with a support worker, and then they might they might be challenging, right? Because they're saying, why would I get close to you? Why would I form an attachment to you? Because you're just going to leave. And so how do I feel safe with that? You know, if you think about right now, if I said to you, look around and go and form a new friendship where you're actually going to go and call this person and hang out and see them outside of work, that takes time. It takes time to sit in that uncomfortable silence. It takes time to feel comfortable with someone. And for some of us, it's more challenging than others. And imagine that as a participant having to do that every single day with a support worker who's coming in, and it's just so much. It's just so much. And trauma informed is understanding that and providing a safe space where the participant can actually have enough time to figure out who they are.
Meryl?
I was just going to add to everything that's been said is the three statements are very childlike. There are things I would say to a child, not to a 28-year-old adult. And treating people for who they are is really important, because otherwise we're just taking away their status, we're taking away the dignity, we're taking away all of those things.
Yeah. So this is a good reminder that we might be trying to use a trauma informed sort of approach, where sometimes we really need to have a think about what we're saying, and our hearts might be in the right place, but we might need a little bit of practice. So this is the end. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I just, John, and yeah.
Sure. I guess I was just saying, and this is kind of a comment with, but basically what you're talking about is someone, I've got a friend who's in the NDIS, you know, and has been through a lot of support workers in his time. And what's interesting about seeing it, which providers don't see nor do support workers, is the grief of when support workers leave and he has misinterpreted that relationship. And I saw it again recently, and it happens again and again. And they all of a sudden move to Darwin, and he can't work out. The most recent one, there was a falling out between the family and the support worker, but he can't work out why that person no longer speaks to him or responds to his messages, because he has seen that relationship as one that is more like a friendship than a like support worker relationship. And I think that probably goes on more than people see. And the saddest part of it is that a lot of people in the space who are professionals don't actually see the impact of that. Of like, just like if any of us lose a friendship, it's really, really hard. And it's horrendous if someone just doesn't respond to your messages when you interpret that way.
Yeah,
It's absolutely grief. Like I've seen it before. It happened recently. And he's so worried as well about his other support workers leaving that he spends, if I catch up with him, he'll very quickly bring up a support worker. And I've got to explain to him that, you know, she's working with him currently, but she might not be in 6 months' time. And he has to understand that.
Yeah.
But because of the relationships get built, I know it's really hard, but it's a really big problem.
But I do think this is why boundaries are really, really, really important in the space. And like I was saying before, we are professionals. There are some things that we don't say. And when we start blurring those lines, that's when things like this happen, where people become confused about the nature of that relationship. And it's okay to say to someone, I do care about you but we're not friends, and explaining why we're not friends, because this isn't a two-way relationship. That doesn't mean I care for you any less. And those conversations are really tough, but people need to know where that relationship stands, that needs to be communicated consistently, because things like this happen all the time. You're not going to be their support worker for the next 25 years. That's very unrealistic to think so. So although awkward, very important to maintain those boundaries.
Yeah, and it goes back to your preventative measures. And so, in the intake, when you're intaking that participant, it's really important to have that expectation set. So then it takes the pressure away from that boundary. The support worker, again, might not feel, it's really hard to work an 8 to 12-hour shift with someone and not form some kind of attachment. So, if you establish the expectation in the service agreement, or like, hey, this is Mo, she's your support worker. Just remember, she has to abide by these company laws. It actually takes that away from the support workers, and the support worker can say, oh, do you remember when you met my boss and she said that I can't do this,
or I can't speak to you outside of my shift hours, or things like that. That maintains that boundary. But also, this is a great opportunity to help them form legitimate, genuine friendships. That
Can I just say on that? I mean, the NDIS is, a lot of people look at the negatives, but it sounds like it's given us the opportunity to try to help. And when you compare our first world, because you mentioned first world and third world, people in third world don't even have the opportunity to open the wound, it sounds like. So it's interesting when you compare us with in a good environment compared to someone overseas where it's all perception as well for them, but there's still real wound that isn't even getting out. So I think we're lucky we're here, but
I'm just going to add one last thing. Sorry, I know we're probably short on time, but you know how we mentioned at the beginning of the session talking about the trauma that mum went through as well? I think it's important in a trauma lens to look outside of our role and as a participant as well, because a lot of support workers lack the skill within themselves to form friendships. So to them, it becomes really awkward to then form friendships around. Support workers are very alone role. So sometimes a lot of the people that are doing that aren't used to working in a team. They don't have to speak to anybody else. They're very familiar with the people that they do speak to. So having a trauma lens support is beyond that. And when Mary and I were talking about this session, I said, if everybody goes into a planning meeting or even a review meeting or even just a participant check-in meeting with a trauma-informed lens, we're all going through something. And so it's not a blame game. What did the seal provider not do? Why didn't the planner fund this? We're all going through something. So we need to be implementing these strategies for every single person, not just the participant. Yeah.
I just want to say that it's too easy to say to speak about boundary the way you do. Like if you don't give them warm, they know it. Like it's when I write a report, it's really annoying because you cannot put emotion in your report because we are supposed to be scientists. Blah blah. I disagree with that too. So basically, if you give them warm, they understand it and it will help them. If you don't, they know it as well. So basically, like I agree with the gentleman about the that this is for 6 months. The guy will form bond, like the support worker will form bond with the client, and after the support worker is leaving. But the thing is that if you don't do that, you don't help them. You have to give them the warmth and yeah, when it's tough, it's hard for them, but that's the way.
you can have rapport in
then
professional settings.
and
No one is
but
saying that's like of
and
course you need to be friendly and you need to build rapport, but there are situations where the support workers might be giving out their personal numbers, or they might be speaking to them outside of shift. That's where it becomes a problem. And making it clear, like, that I'm here to support you to do something, which is to also find friends so that you can always speak to them, because I want to be here as long as I can. It's okay to say that, but I want you to be as independent as possible. You can have those conversations. And I think as well, sometimes our own sense of awkwardness prevents us from having these tough conversations. But the reality is, if you go into a situation and you set the tone from the beginning, you can still build rapport and you can still maintain professional boundaries. Pulling back is really hard though.
Yeah, common sense is not common practice. Right. Right. And so I think this is a whole new topic, but it is about self-awareness and knowing, am I good at this? Am I not good at that? How am it all comes back to the preventative measures of, I know that I'm really not good at boundaries, so I'm going to be prepared. When my participant asks for my number, I know I'm already going to have a response. When my participant says, can I come home with you and meet your family? I'm going to have these responses ready to go because I know that I'm not very good at this. But then it comes back to, how well do you know yourself? How well do you know your triggers? How well do you know your traumas? And how do you live with that? So, yeah.
Maybe we take one more question, but don't forget they're still here. They're not going anywhere. We can talk to them after. I think there's one. Yeah, he's got the. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask, like, a lot of the times, like this conversation's been around like, you know, participants and how to support their trauma, and that's granted, like, you know, they're going through a lot, they've been through a lot, but I do feel a lot of the times support workers tend to get the short end of the stick when it comes towards trauma, especially like the vicarious trauma, like with allied health, you know, you guys go through a lot of supervisions and things like that, where with support workers, I think support workers sometimes can be the most resilient people, and that resilience can sometimes affect them negatively. For instance, in this situation, you might have a support worker that starts becoming frustrated, and they're like, you know what, I don't want to deal with an intellectual disability ever again because of the a trauma that they may have had with Alex in your example. Is there ways where, I know there's EAPs and all that type of stuff, is there more informal ways to be able to help your staff from an organizational perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'm trying to also come from like the emotional side as well. Like, I know there's training and all that type of stuff for preventative measures.
So regular debriefing. So one of the things that psychologists do is that if I've had a really tough session, I just pick up the phone to another psychologist friend and I'll just talk about it. Yeah, I'm not talking about the person, I'm talking about my feelings. And so that workplace culture is really important, where you actually have dedicated time for the staff to just vent, really, because the work is tough. It's okay to vent. And making that regular practice. But also, not only do you get to kind of like have that cathartic response of venting, but it also provides an opportunity to problem solve. So when I'm on the phone with my, you know, psych friends, and I'm like, oh, you know, this was really hard. They're like, okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Did you try this thing? Like, no, I didn't. I'll go try that next. And so it works in kind of both ways, where you get to get that emotion out, but also there's a little bit of problem solving. And it also kind of normalizes that it's okay to be frustrated sometimes. Like, you're not, it's unrealistic to go into work and have the best day at work every time. Like, that just doesn't happen. So setting those processes in so that it's consistent is really important. So not just one-offs, like, okay, we're going to have a team meeting and then we're going to do it again, you know?
But how do you do that if, like, you do offer debriefing and all that type of stuff and supervisions, and but
So you can
we have buddy systems as well. So you can have like a particular person that you call, and then you kind of like do like almost like a chain. You could do it that way, or if it depends on the setting as well. Like if you know that you have a monthly meeting, maybe that you make it a little bit longer, so you have a little bit of a debrief in there. I don't know what do you.
What do you have support workers? Yeah. And what's your incident report management? What happens? You have an incident, and then what happens? Who reviews the incident?
So there's an internal review that happens, and like a debrief session will happen, as well as like they get offered counseling and all that type of stuff. But sometimes you just don't know, and like you don't know.
But you're talking about, I'm guessing that you're talking about major incidents, right? But how many incident reports? You get a lot of incident reports, right? Because a lot of stuff has to be reported. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a huge incident, right?
Yeah, we get a fair few incident reports.
Yeah. So if you ask support workers, anybody, they just want to be heard. And a lot of the times, all it takes is just, hey, I've read your incident report. Did you need a chat? Did you want to speak to someone? Hey, I saw that it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Hey, I saw you've been doing really well. Hey, I noticed that you called on call 3 times last week. Did you want to have a chat about that? It doesn't have to be much more than that. They just want to feel heard and supported. And I can't stress enough how important asking your support workers for feedback is. hey, what could we do to make you feel a little bit hurt? Because without them, there is no us.
And that's like a really great reactive response. And when you pair that with a regular like check-in, like it tends to cover most bases.
So I'm gonna be the rude person, but no, I think they're not going anywhere. There's lots of opportunities to ask them questions, and so on. I just wanted to make a last comment. I mean, from everything that has been spoken about, for me, it's not just about how we approach participants or how we approach our staff or our support workers. I mean, a lot of that to me just seems like basic human interaction. Go in there not expecting, but rather being, I guess, present. I think I was meeting with Yoss the other day, and she said, be interested, be interested. Be genuinely interested in who you're talking to. I mean, across the board, you may end up with better outcomes. Naturally, it could be staff, could be a person you're working with, a participant, it could be in any situation. If you don't understand, you don't understand. Be genuinely interested in understanding, and maybe you might find something out that would adjust how you approach that person. So, with that insight from today, and maybe a massive thank you to Mo and Mary. Of course. So please, if you guys want specific topics or there's something you guys or want to bring to the table to the community, please reach out to us. Next month, we are going back to Woodcroft. The reason being is because we've got a event focused on bringing mainstream providers or non-NDIS funded providers to you guys. So we've got a few amazing people locked in. So it's focused on the fact that we always turn to NDIS funded supports to solve problems, but what happens if you can't? And so we're bringing that to you guys. So again, if there's anyone in particular you think of that should be there, let us know. We're happy to bring them to you. Yeah, Service New South Wales, Centrelink. We're trying to get police out there, but we'll see what happens. Because I think that's a common support that should be aware of this space and be more involved as well. So that will be there next week. Next month. Gosh, the last Thursday of every month. That's when we meet. Lastly, the allied health providers. We've got a specific only allied health group that meet quarterly, run with Muriel and Howard. So if you're interested, please feel free. But a massive thank you for everyone for coming and appreciate it and enjoy the food and networking and chatting and thank you so much.